Sorry. Just making it official.
First thing is, does anybody have any blockages?
So in the context of the new cohort, if you try to do something and you couldn't figure out how to do it, even though you're not working on something that's trying to go into production, that would count. So, and we can sort of play it by ear if it's something that we dig deeper into. But did anyone, well, how did people proceed in exploring? Was anyone able to actually make an interview that did anything with stuff from the wizard, or where are people at? Yes or no?
A talkative bunch you have. They were doing it the other day too, right? Matt was asking questions. Not a question, not a single question.
I think it's because it's like the Socratic method. So we wait to be called on. We wait for like, you tell us. This is my worst part of middle school.
Time to unlearn all those habits.
Just volunteer.
I make people. I ask questions that require answers. Like, raise your hand if you tried anything with code yesterday or today.
Yeah, well, let's do that simple one. How many people actually ran something through a wizard? Okay, no one got there yet. All right. Well, then it'll be good to pair people off and get some stuff done today then. All right.
There we go.
Well, we'll Maeve, I think when you go through, and then we'll figure out where we want people to be at.
Okay. So, testing wise, what do we have to say about testing? It's a lot. We tried out a new template for testing the TRO, and we got some feedback from one of the volunteers on that, and I am in the process of making a new testing template. Also doing testing volunteer guide. So that's going to have all the resources in one spot, and all the instructions in one spot, kind of like a bigger version of the volunteer guide. And so when people want to learn about testing, that's the document that they can refer to, and it will have everything in there. That was the kind of outcome of our testing call yesterday, where we had a couple of the testing volunteers give us feedback on certain aspects, and how we should really present that. So that's the first draft is done now. I want to improve it a little bit later, and then the second draft I'll send out. All of this is happening on the testing channel. So I took a couple of volunteers through Slack and just showed the basics. So everyone's kind of familiar with the testing channels and all the different kind of channels that we're on for the different aspects of the project. So yeah, anything with testing is in that testing channel. We need to actually test some more. So that's going to involve doing the second run of certain tests. And we're going to have testing volunteers who aren't on this call do that based on the new template. And that's all.
Or if anyone wants to test. How people from this call are also allowed to test.
Yeah, that's also, you're welcome to. I think this week is just you just train and you're just figuring out, right? I'm not sure.
Yeah, so we're just figuring stuff out. So if we'll revisit sort of where people are at, but it seems like maybe some more concrete things would be useful.
I just want to make it clear that the different groups are not so isolated from each other, that there is the ability to.
Yeah, other people should be on this call too. You just all follow directions from, well, you've been asked to be on this call, and everyone else has just sort of been asked to be on this call.
So that's about testing. The 209A testing, I think, Kate, are you writing scenarios for that? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, I feel like we kind of hit a backlog, so I've taken a break from doing the scenarios. Because I feel like if you do them too early, I end up just having to change them anyway. So like, I don't want to create such a backlog that I end up having to redo my work in a week when we finally get there. But I think scenarios are done for the impoundment. Scenarios are done for a child support affidavit. I've written all the scenarios for defendant information. I have not finished the outcome PDFs for that. The outcome PDFs are fairly tedious, so I'll get to them. I don't think, is there a standalone plaintiff information interview, Michelle?
Not yet.
Okay, so I can't do
everything
that
else
one
has
yet.
been taking precedence now.
And
you could.
I
It'd just be really painful.
had started affidavit scenarios, but I think that's still too actively being edited.
Getting changed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the affidavit, I don't know that the affidavit is gonna ever really be a good one to do in isolation. No, it will have to be, I think, because there's too much that can feel like go wrong with it.
Well, it might be one of the ones that we say, and this is where we test the whole interview, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that, yeah, because complaints page 1 and 2, I don't think those are going to be really hard to test in isolation. I think they're just too stitched up.
They're too integrated in the whole interview.
Yeah, because like the complaint page 1, like questions are kind of scattered throughout. I think that would be really hard to do on its own. And complaint page 2, sort of the same.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we're ready for like the whole interview test.
Well, Michelle was saying that to test the whole interview it's a really big thing. You just sent me a message. I kind of like I don't know. Isolated message. I think about
Yes,
that.
I was complaining. Yep. It's each round through it's grueling. So
Long.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we could break it up. Maybe this is too specific for this call, but maybe we could break it up into child scenarios and non-child scenarios.
So we can talk about that more specifically. That's taking a deep dive, and I think we should have an actual meeting about that because I have thoughts on it.
Yeah, I agree.
And on combining, like for that specific purpose, combining certain types of tests.
Yeah, yeah. At some point, let's have a call just about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's testing. Is there anything else you want to add to testing, Michelle?
No, there's work to be done. I think we continue to make really good progress. Learning a lot. I mean, this is new for all of us, so I think the things we're learning are like, I mean, they're incredible things about testing, and that's not really going to be. I hope that's not going to be my field moving forward, but no, I think it's good.
Hi, Quentin.
Hi, Quentin.
Okay, so the next thing is 209A. Is that what you've been working on, Quentin?
Yeah. Have I been working I'm just sleeping in the middle, sorry.
It's okay. So Quentin's been making some PRs and I've been looking over them. He made like a real nice clean PR, and then the testing.
All right, we should explain what a PR is, just vaguely, so that people have some idea what's going
on. Quentin edited some code, and before we combine it with the existing code so that it can be run by people with a link, we look over that code and we test what that code is trying to do. If I were to explain, do you want me to explain Git and GitHub?
No, that's good.
Okay.
And then it stands for pull request, and it's from a thing called GitHub, but you got it.
Okay. Yes, pull request from GitHub. So I'm doing the code review. The PR is beautiful and really well contained, and the testing for it requires like going through and triggering all the addenda, which takes like half an hour each time. We ran into a few snags, so it wasn't, and it was close to the end. It's driving me crazy. The snags are close to the end. So I'm gonna start skipping parts and seeing if I still get that behavior.
I think sorry, Quentin, I think
like
there's something from,
Oh, are you hearing too much noise for me, or sorry?
It's a lot. I don't know what it is.
Someone has a plane.
It's the wind, probably.
The wind. Okay, that's the bow.
I did hear a plane or something. It sounded like.
I also heard a plane. Like it's okay.
Wind is very powerful. It's a powerful force of nature.
Okay, sorry, Michelle, to interrupt you. Yeah.
So the snags we're running into are close to the end, which make it. I mean, either we use the skipping code, which, takes isn't the actual interface, so we might be accidentally doing stuff that means that the error isn't triggered, or you spend a half an hour, right? Anyway, but it's cool we're getting the addenda integrated and identifying any issues with that, and we might start having people, if we can actually get some informal testing done on that, maybe that's something we should talk about. Some like unprescribed testing that just tries to put a whole lot of information in fields and see what happens. So that's cool. Moving on, I think, unless Quentin has something to say, you're allowed to talk, Quentin, as well. To say about this.
I'll just try not to have too much background noise, which is going to be hard.
What is happening at your house? It's so
I'm just
loud.
sitting on the street here, so almost on the street.
Oh, you're like, okay.
It's getting a little too hot in the attic that I was working in. It's a hot day here.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we have some good changes that are ready coming up for the 209A, some stuff to reorganize the affidavit of care and custody, some more language stuff that we were working on just right up to the minute before this call, and overall, everything is going in the right way. We're just trying to keep the changes iterative so that we don't break things. But I think once we get in today's work, it'll be a lot nicer for the testers to have this in front of them.
Yeah. Well, that sounds good.
We're not sure how iterative, like how well we can sustain the iterative nature of the like bite-sized chunks, right? Because there are a lot of changes that have to be made together. So we'll see how it goes. But we're experimenting. It's
going to be our goal, but I think we're close to the big changes being over, unless we have another meeting with advocates and we learn another huge thing we have to refactor. But I think we're away. I mean, the one thing that we got big feedback on before, we already kind of knew was a problem. We were just hoping it wasn't a showstopper, and it turned out to be. So.
And what does refactor mean?
Refactor means going in and making big changes to the way you do something to have basically the same result, but in a better way. You're rewriting code you already wrote that's functional. That's kind of the point, to make it better. And the change we needed to make here was just to make the user experience a lot better. They were finding it challenging to complete a section of the form because of the way we had questions set up in order. We had to redo those. It's a big change on the back end. Hopefully it'll be worth it, I think, to make it easier for people to use it.
Okay. I think is there anything else that we have to say about the 209A? Caroline, Kate, do you have anything you want to add?
So do we need to be doing anything to start the private beta?
We need to get the okay from you that it's at a place where it's good to start the private
beta. That's maybe once we have the okay from Quentin.
We'll just delegate it all the way down.
Well, the thing is, it's the structure of that affidavit of care.
Yeah, I think once this round is done.
I think the feature set that we had sort of committed to after the focus group was that we wanted the affidavit of care to be better. I sent you over the Northeastern folks' notes, Kate.
And Caroline, Quentin, and I just had a call about that.
I imagine there was a lot of replication of the focus groups comments and then some little, picky things. But yeah.
It was almost all like little language stuff. They didn't have any of the same big things, which is interesting.
Right?
I warned them about the affidavit of care. I said, that's just.
Oh, so maybe they just kept hands off on that.
That's just we know that's messed up.
Yeah.
So, but overall, it seemed very positive. They seemed to say this, good structure. They liked it. So that's good. So yeah, as soon as you think, Kate, that it's ready to share, we'll start sharing it with people. We'll move it from test. Well, no, we'll keep it on test. What do you think, Quentin, about that? Private beta, I think we decided we were going to keep it on test, right?
I think we can keep it on test, yeah. And then we'll try to start making smaller changes on dev going forward, which I think is more realistic now that the dev server is performing better.
And just so all the new folks understand, we have multiple servers where different versions of things live as they go through the life cycle. So the server you're all playing with is the development server, which is sort of a sandboxed, isolated thing that never actually will be used by real users out in the world. Then we have a test server where we sort of might share it out with some people to use in some ways to test it, but that's still not the one that is accessible, the version that is accessible from our website, which is the production server, which is the one that's the real one that's ready for prime time. So as things move through the pipeline of start sort of working on them, you get them to a good place where you want people to test them, and then you put them out to the real world. And the reason we do that is so that we can't break anything in production. We can't break the real world while we're playing around with new things, which is one of the reasons why you shouldn't worry about playing around on your server with the dev server, because the most you could ever do is make it so that the dev server wasn't working. But you're not going to do that either, probably.
It'll be hard.
The private beta, which server is that going to be on?
On test.
That's on test. Okay.
Yeah, so I think once the affidavit of care edits are implemented, I think, and we reach out to Laura about
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
So I have a quick suggestion for kind of, proofing our environment. If we lock the branches on GitHub so that only admins can change master, can change the main branch that has kind of the ultimately approved working code, then without a review process, then we can make sure that people can't push to master from doc assemble from the playground. And that might also help with those concerns, if that's where people are working.
I think we were also saying that for any new code, people mostly could be working on new projects and will be in their own GitHub repository too. So that may not.
Oh, really? Okay.
I don't see any reason to not do that for anything new. It will take a little time to detangle the things that are already published, which we should do. But I think new forms should go in their own separate GitHub repo.
Sure.
I think that makes sense. For those of you who, maybe one of the things I should do is have everyone do a GitHub thing. I know we want something for later, but maybe I can give you something sooner. But that being said, Maeve, any more on the agenda?
I think that covers it as far as the stuff that I wanted to talk about. As I said, it might be a good idea to include a topic about the volunteers that we have here. So something about what they're supposed to be working on today. If you're not having a meeting, do you have a meeting with them as well?
No, I think this is our meeting, so we're gonna take advantage of this time. Because I also wanted the project manager's input on. So what we thought would be good for exploration for the rest of the week would be to have folks try their hand at building a form that threw some data into something. Quentin, on your documentation site, do you have a lesson on attaching something to a PDF or a docx file, being able to auto-populate?
What do you mean by, like,
I mean, if you have any lessons from your class last semester that we could repurpose to just point people at to play around
how
with.
To create a document, you mean?
Yeah.
Create a document or add a PDF to their playground and then have code populate the PDF.
Yeah, well, so I think part of that depends on what we want to have folks do. So we have a little discussion about what forms might be good forms for y'all to sort of start playing around with. And at first we started thinking of some 209A ones, but then we realized that we're trying to get stuff out the door with 209A. Or rather, there's like this private beta process, and so things won't be public in that sort of avenue for a while. So if we could do some stuff outside of 209A. And so I guess the first thing to do would be for the project managers to, I liked Quentin's suggestions on some of the forms, although some of them may be more difficult than we want to have people start with.
Yeah, that's the challenge. I don't know any other like really easy housing forms that we should do. There are a couple other motions that mostly are Word documents, and they're part of MADE for the most part already.
Yeah.
So what if Kate, what about the emergency ex parte motion to modify or terminate that we talked about yesterday? We created that Jeff and I did one. Yes, we just did it yesterday, just a PDF. What if we just do that? How's that for an easy
Well,
form?
I think David's concern was doing some of the secondary 209A forms, well, the big 209A. I mean, I think you could put out pet protection. There's no reason pet protection can't go up
yeah, I
first.
think those
Or the
two,
motions to modify.
I mean, they're two simple forms. They're not on our list right now. And whatever volunteers can play with them, mess around with them, it's not going to put us backwards. It's not going to interfere with any of the work that we're doing.
No, but we're not just worried about putting people back. We're worried about moving stuff forward.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
I do think that.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, if you wanted to get out of the 209A context and stick to simple PDFs, I do think the council request for guardianships is a very simple form. I mean, I'm biased. It's like a pet issue of mine, but like it's like a kind of an essential constitutional right in Massachusetts. And I think that's a good one. And the CRA forms, which I have no familiarity with at all, look extremely simple.
I think CRAs, I mean, they're so dangerous that we need a lot of context for them. And from a legal aid children's advocate position, I'd put them at the bottom of the list.
So what we
Mary
might,
Mo's.
Yeah, the Mary Mo's are a very small number of folks, but they are pretty straightforward, at least to start first version.
And that would get you like a few different courts, because if you wanted to get like kind of a variety of forms with different courts in the workflow.
I'm going to share my screen here because I put together a Google Doc of the stuff the court had sent over, minus any 209A stuff. Okay, so it's just the stuff outside of 209A. And what we have here are the forms as the court had asked for. And then what I tried to do was I broke them up by district, but then what I did is I wanted us to have some objective measure of sort of prioritization. So basically I went and the court coefficient is basically the number of cases that go through that court in a year. This frequency coefficient is my attempt to figure out how many of those cases are the ones mentioned by that form. And then this difficulty coefficient would be how likely we think it is that we could automate a form in a week. It's an entirely arbitrary distinction. The point is it's just some relative statement about how difficult it would be to automate the form. The idea being that you can multiply these all together and get an expected value, where the value is sort of expected number of people that we could help in a week, right? And I know we're not actually going to finish any of these in a week. It's like I said, we could say, how likely are we? I just wanted it had to be short enough that there was some difference between forms, right? If we said, how likely is it that we could complete this in a year, then everything would be 100%. And that wouldn't help us prioritize. So the point is, if we think about expected value, this thing gives us a way to sort of get at stuff. And but some of these numbers are just very, very raw guesses. So like we can be very Bayesian here and sort of think them out. But what we tease out is that the housing, the TRO for housing, that's at the top. That's fine. That's just about to be done. The motion to remove defaults or default judgments, that also ends up being very high. But Quentin, you were saying that might work better as a doc file.
Which I don't think is a problem when people are starting new and they're taking ownership of the whole form. So part of our triage process was to let people label fields on a PDF, which is really easy for anyone to do without learning anything about DocAssemble. But I think you can end up with a better product that's easier to develop if you start with the DocX. So if we're starting new projects where people are going to take ownership of the whole thing all the way through, I don't see any problem with us adding some DocX templates at this stage.
Well, I think that might be that's sort of my inclination, is take this group here, folks now, and what we can do, instead of just having, say, train this, learn this, we'll say, here's a form. You're gonna take this puppy and bring it all the way through. And we recognize that that's not gonna be something you're gonna do in a week or right away, but you'll have something concrete. And so pedagogically, the way we're approaching this basically is you're going to figure out what it is you need to know based upon the goal in front of you, right? So the idea is you have a Word document. how do you get questions to pre-fill that? And so you have a guide to guide your questioning, because we don't have the capacity right now to sit down and do 5 days of DocAssemble training. That being said, once we know what people need, we can probably jump in and out and help with things.
I have
I want to take the pulse. Michelle, thoughts?
So there's like different ways to come at this. One is to say, learn the usual path of making an interview and make it in your own style, for sure. Another thought is to start by making an interview that just utilizes the basic questions, and then go into making your own with that knowledge. You could come at it the other way, make your own, and then learn how you can utilize the basic questions. I'm not sure which one would be a smoother process. But you could also go naming PDF fields to start understanding the built-ins that we've made. I'm not sure that would be the best path, though.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts? And anybody else?
Yeah, and I think what we're trying to do is minimize time to viable output.
Mm-hmm. I'm saying that the more like the learning path can determine how fast we get to the next stage.
Exactly. Yeah. No.
Right?
I'm agreeing. Like you. I'm not sure what the path is. I think you're right that labeling PDF is not the way to go, because that's just going to occupy people's time.
Yeah. Just brainstorming. Yep.
Yeah. So anyone, we're just spitballing here, so you can unmute and spitball along.
Okay.
Lily,
go ahead.
Hi. I just want to go back to the idea we discussed before about a checklist for phase 2. So I think for people who are just starting to learn DocAssemble, we can create a similar checklist. I know they probably have been going through some training sessions and learn certain things, but it would be helpful if we have a written instruction and say step 1, step 2, step 3, and at each step, if there's some template they can use as the first step, we will say, okay, where you can find it, all these kind of things, give them this kind of guidance, so every step at least they know in what direction they're going, and what tools they can grab that's ready to use, or where they can use their own creativity to do things. Some people like to just follow instructions and don't think too much. Others may like to add their own flavors. I don't know, but I think if we have some kind of checklist, it will be good for the people who are just learning to do it.
Are you volunteering to make such a checklist?
I could. I just don't know the timeline. How fast do you want it?
Yeah, we're probably pretty fast. So we do, but that doesn't mean that the checklist has to be done. It doesn't have a utility if it's not the thing we use right now. Michelle, you were going to say?
I was going to say, even like a checklist later is still useful.
Yeah.
Right.
So that I think the checklist will always have a use whenever it is done. The thing is, right now we've got about a half dozen folks who have time and need something to do, but we want them to do stuff that's not just. We want them to do something that's necessarily skill building, as opposed to just. So like we could throw everyone into testing, and then, but then no one would. I mean, you'd be learning the testing skill. But I think we're trying to focus on core like DocAssemble proficiency.
So would it be useful for everyone to start with the same interview so that they can compare notes and strategies, and we can compare notes? We have something, standard to go off of, and then move on to unique interviews after that.
That might be one approach. I was thinking.
Oh,
yeah, go ahead, Quentin.
I don't know if we have to have everyone on the same interview to have that value. I think if we had 3 interviews, how many people do we have right now who are going to be starting this week with different things?
Unique individuals.
I think you've got 8.
8 people.
If I remember
So maybe
from
2.
yesterday.
So maybe if we had 4 people working on something together, we are more likely to have, because 8 people is too many to work on one form together.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I don't think it's valuable to make people do something twice that we're not going to use both versions of. But I think 4 people can collaborate together to learn at the same time and make progress at the same time, potentially. Maybe 3 would be better than 4. So 2 groups of 2 to 3 people.
Sure.
Yeah, Quentin said exactly what I was going to say.
Okay,
Perfect.
so I didn't have to interrupt you to say it. Sorry, David.
No, I'm glad I didn't have to say it. So yeah, so then I think the thing is, let's identify those, I think 3 forms, and then we'll identify groups from the people who are here, and whoever, I think the one person who might be missing, we'll tack them onto somewhere, and we'll go with that. I think the motion to remove defaults and default judgments obviously is one. Do we have a Word document that we like?
I have
for
a
that one?
Word document for that one. I'd asked for it from Annette a while ago.
Okay.
Yep, so I can, yeah, I think that's a good one. Here are what my criteria would be. This is really good. I think I would add in a couple of columns, which are basically make up the difficulty coefficient.
Yeah.
There. So it would be number of fields.
Oh, I like that. Okay.
And then the other one would be amount of branching logic, which I'm not sure if that's the right way to call it, but maybe if we thought of it in terms of scenarios. So what are the user personas that would use this? Number of...
Or the difficulty just be a gut check from someone who's familiar, right?
But I think it might be helpful pedagogically here to think of not just how difficult it is to do for an expert, but how many different types of skills do you need to do? Because for me, it might be no problem. Yeah. It might be simple because all of the different skills you need are really simple ones.
Right. So we're going to say
branches. Someone new, it's better if they only learn one thing rather than 5.
So like
still a lot harder.
Fields and branches?
Yeah, I think branches is a good way to say it. So what I would expect to be the simplest forms are going to be like very general motions where there are very few checkboxes that customize it. Those may be hard for people to fill out, but on the other hand, we can start with a very simple MVP that lets someone, basically all the knowledge is in the person's head for how to use it properly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't come into our building of the form at all.
I have a motion that we need, and it's very simple.
When you say we need, is it a 209A need or
no, not 209A, and it's even housing, and it's even COVID housing. And
perfect.
I'm trying to think where it is because we emailed Annette, and Annette is so like overwhelmed with everything. She goes, "Just do what you can."
Well, first I'd say let's deal with the stuff that the court explicitly wants.
Yeah.
We are going to expand beyond that.
Right.
But if we're looking to sort of hit right away, so if we're excluding 209A, these are the forms we're talking about.
Okay. I think this is actually a form the court wants, but they just don't have. But anyway.
Do you remember anything about it, Caroline, to help us guess what it is? Or
I'm going to find it. You go carry on. I'm going to find it and I'll
Very
send
good.
it to you and then you can decide.
I don't know most of these probate and family or juvenile forms at all. So
yeah.
The third one, that motion to vacate, Quentin, that's what I've been working on that you've been helping me with.
Yep.
That had to be like totally done from scratch because there's not an existing template.
Okay.
And
yours is way beyond the MVP.
Yeah.
Because it has like the detailed building of parts.
So you've got that one going.
Yeah. The Guardian.
What about this motion to request?
I think that is not something I know a ton of.
Oh no, that's a whole Rogers order thing.
All of that goes, all of that stuff is going to be big packets. All this guardianship stuff.
Complaint for contempt seems like that's generally pretty simple.
Complaint for contempt's a good one, and that's one of the emergency ones. It has a few more than 8 fields, but nothing in it is overly complicated. It might need like a little SME guidance, which I'm happy to provide if people need it.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, like I'm always here. You guys, if you guys have substantive questions on these forms on family law, I'm here.
And we have motion to vacate default judgment a couple times, but that I
that's the
assume
same
as the motion to remove.
That's the same one.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard to say because the district and BMC were not as that's the language they use. So it's motion to vacate default judgment. I assume, based upon the context of the larger discussion, they were referring to within the housing context.
Oh, that's a good point. Because
they also at one point they say motion to remove defaults. So that could be, you know.
So I'm real quick going to say the line that we know must be
our
said
time.
in every meeting.
Are you respectful of our time?
Well, we're conscious of everyone's time, right?
Yes.
Right.
What we want to do though is be able to send folks out of this meeting with, so we sort of move beyond stand up. So if people have to go who are in the management team, that's cool, but we want to make sure that the new cohort has something to do on the way out. You're getting to see the sausage made here, folks.
So I'm unmuted. I found the form and it's sample motion to dismiss for non-essential eviction. So this is, it's not to an NA, but it's essentially, it's really easy. And if your landlord's trying to evict you saying it's essential, you can say it's non-essential because you didn't do any of the things that you can only be evicted for. So it's not a motion form that the court has, but it's something that's very relevant to, not very relevant, is relevant to the here and now. And
so it's basically a response to emergency eviction.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. How do I, where do I?
That does seem like a good one.
Yeah,
how do I get it to you guys?
Well, we have we did have the old form to submit forms.
Oh, okay.
But I think Maeve really would maybe have an idea of how it might go into. I like the idea of Mary Mo's because then that gives us something from Superior wants.
Right.
Again, it's not.
You have an affidavit for Mary Mo, so don't you?
Yeah. Technically two forms that'll need to be stitched.
It's technically two forms.
But they both look pretty simple though.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is what we would do is we put together an MVP and then engage SME.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know who does these.
So few people.
Are those done by CPCS or who?
CPCS does do Mary Mo's. Yeah.
Oh, agreement to continue? That seems like an easy one to do.
Oh, where's that?
Oh, well, the only thing is it might involve two people signing the same form.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything with agreements. Complaint for mod on line 20 is another probate one, but it might not be terrible.
I think
I like the affidavit of intricacy. You already have one of those built, right?
Yeah, so that one is already built without the supplement. So that's an adaptation, but it's not a good learning thing. But it's I'm just marking it.
But also, right now during COVID-19, I think the courts are not requiring affidavits.
No, they are. That's correct. But the courts have also asked.
Still on their list, though. So I wonder why they put it on there. Yeah. Could be one hand not speaking to the other, I guess.
And you still might need them for other, like if you're trying to waive the cost of service.
Oh, that's
you
probably
still need it.
Yeah, they're not
requiring the cost of parent education. Like there's a lot of.
Doesn't it need to be so? But you still need to submit it to the court and have it approved, so then that you can give it to the sheriff.
Exactly. Yeah, and I don't think the sheriff's going to waive it without.
Yeah, that's what it is. There's like a ton of things that come into that aren't just filing fees, so they're not probably requiring it for filing fees, but
right. But like probate court, there's a ton of other costs you would typically get waived.
I don't really know if we want waiver of jury trial. Seems simple, but I don't know if we really want to prioritize people waiving their jury rights.
I don't want to prioritize those right now.
That's how I feel about the CRA.
I would love to have the supplemental affidavit of indigency, but it's kind of a bear.
Had one of your students started working on that, David?
I mean, in a way, it's good practice for volunteers, isn't it?
Okay. What's that, Carolyn?
It's good practice for volunteers. It's long, but it's not complicated.
No.
Well, let's start.
I mean, I would love to do that one as a Word document too, because it asks for so much data that you're filling into boxes that are going to be empty most of the time.
Right.
Easier to do that as a Word document, but.
And especially if you have a group of volunteers working on it, it's really good. I mean, the time thing is mediated by the number of people you have working on it, right?
Well,
does anyone know this civil action cover sheet?
Yeah, you have to it's like in addition to any civil complaint in Superior Court, you have to file it for any civil case there. So it's not ever going to be a standalone.
Okay. Well, it's still, that seems worth doing. Actually, can we see the top of it again, David?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
To
This
make it
claim stuff is tricky in the contract.
Yeah, to make it useful, you would probably need a fair bit of like guidance.
Yeah,
like it's an annoying form to fill out, even as like a lawyer. I'm like, I don't know.
So
it seems like that's not really a form you ever want to have on its own.
No, you would never just file it. It goes.
And you would want to like pre-fill most of it when they're doing the form that requires it, right? You wouldn't want to make them calculate the tort claims after they've just gone through a long interview about their. Although
if I remember from David, like Superior Court doesn't have a lot of pre-made forms beyond the Mary Mo's in the 30 A's, right?
They don't.
And if you wanted to do the 30 A's, you might want to get like, I don't know who would be a good subject matter expert on that. Somebody who does like welfare law stuff.
Would it be helpful for attorneys to have something like that where it's like, it just helps them type in the answers, or is it not useful?
On what?
Because we could have the very dumb version of the civil action cover sheet that's like, we're going to ask questions that no one should really know the answers to, but it's still better than making them do it on paper when they can't.
I think there might be a value to the Mary Mo's just because I do know there have
Superior Court.
Yeah, give something to Superior Court, and I do know there was at least one Mary Mo issue where people really would have loved it if the person could have been able to fill it without going into court. Now the thing is, that's another sort of like, you want to get right back to them things, so they'd actually have to be checking their email. But they have asked for it. It is on their list. And they are aware of the gravity of the situation. For those people who are not familiar, I'm not sure if we ever explained what a Mary Mo's action is. It is a juvenile seeking the court's intervention to allow for an abortion. So that's what it is. But as you can imagine, just like with 209As, where the person might be in a house with someone they do not want to tip off to that. Someone might be in a house with someone that do not want to tip off to that.
This is more like a problem for your end, but are there issues with like legal issues with making the tool available to minors for like the terms and conditions and stuff?
I don't know.
This is inherently going to be used by a minor.
That's an interesting question. As
long as they're not terms of use say 13 or older, I think.
Yeah.
Just because of COPPA, which I don't even know. I kind of wrote. I don't even know if that's really what we need to follow. But
I think it is. I think it's a safe. Yeah. So we missed 13 or under, but that's probably very rare. Hopefully. I mean, the Mary Mo's are already pretty rare. I think the main thing is just finding someone who would be able to work with them.
I think I don't know if I don't want to volunteer her, but Sandy, what's her name? She was in Superior Court for years. She's in private practice now. Sandy Lundy. She might be a good SME. She just did a whole lot of work with us. She might be a good SME for that.
Okay, well, you know what? I think if we're not right now thinking about things to code up to learn, maybe these are three good ones, because we get this one actually hits district, BMC, and housing, the motion to remove defaults. This gives us a probate and family court, and this gives us a Superior Court.
Right.
So we'd hit everything but juvenile, but
Jamie Sabino argued Mary Mo for the minor. Maybe Jamie. I just like pulled up the case to see who the lawyer was on it. I didn't know Jamie. That's cool.
She's done everything.
Cool.
She's done everything, and she remembers everything.
Well, then what we could do is and let's see how people feel about this. Motion to remove defaults or default judgments. That would be have a group start working on an interview. They could do it effectively from scratch because there's in a PDF. They'd work with the docx file. The complaint for contempt, is there a PDF of that? Or
yeah, there is, and it must be done on that form.
It must be done on that form.
Yep.
And then the Mary Mo's sort of group these two to, there really isn't going to be a situation where you don't have the affidavit, is there?
You can't, you
Probably
have to
not.
have the affidavit, don't you?
So they're really one form.
Mhm.
So put these two together as one form. And then both this one and this one we could run through the wizard, right?
Contempt and the Mary Mo's.
Yeah. And do we already have these PDFs labeled?
Yeah, contempt's been labeled. I don't think Mary Mo has been. So I did add the Mary Mo documents to the first column in the Trello. Yes.
Okay.
And it might be good to look at them again, just because I know there are problems, and it would be great to have them caught before people start automating them.
All right. So I think if we're trying to figure out actionable items for people to do, what we would do is we would split into 3 groups. We would then say, your job is to move these as far forward as you can based upon where you're coming in from them. And so each group would have a slightly different tack, right? Looks like Mary Mo's would have to start with labeling. So there we would need people who had Adobe.
It's a problem, sorry. Quite a few people don't have Adobe. So is it an option for Suffolk to get students?
In theory, we should be able to, but in theory,
Would
as
the
always,
people who have Adobe be the
Yeah.
people working on this one?
that would be the question: is who has Adobe and would want to work on Mary Mo's?
Adobe Acrobat, not Reader.
Adobe
Not
Acrobat.
Reader. Yeah.
So I signed up for Adobe today because the 7-day free trial, and I'm probably going to pay afterwards anyways. But the Adobe servers are down, I think, today. According to Twitter, Adobe servers are down. But hopefully they're back up by now. That was this morning when I was trying to play with it. But I would volunteer for the Mary Mo's one.
Okay. Do we have someone else who maybe has a non-cloud version of Adobe?
That stuff is expensive.
Yeah.
So
That's like-
Document
anyone who hasn't.
supports signatures now, so that's something.
Oh, that's true.
But the
I
problem with
didn't
Documate
find
is that
worked that well, but I wasn't sure.
Is this,
we
could
want to make sure the
I,
formatting.
we have a PDF converter that people could download and install on their computers. It's not like an unlimited, but it's an MLRI has a license. I don't know how many, and we all use it. If people don't have it, they could install it on their computers. I mean, probably not for 400 volunteers, but I think for this project.
So what is this? Is this for
it's another PDF editor, but I think it works just as well. I think it works.
Nuance is the brand. It's
Nuance.
Yeah, MLAC has a site license for Massachusetts legal aid agencies for that.
The other thing we could do is if we're limited by the group here, we could just put it out to the larger group to get someone to do the labeling for the PDF.
Melanie might be able to.
Yeah.
Or Robin.
But we could also talk to Suffolk, right? Suffolk IT.
Yeah.
And have them help
Yeah.
us, because we're pretty sure that every student at Suffolk has a license for Acrobat.
Well, that makes the most sense, really.
Yeah. Well, the point is we can talk, but turnaround time is the question.
Right.
So if it takes 2 days for them to get back to us, we don't want someone sitting around with nothing to do for 2 days.
Yeah. No.
So as far as formatting goes, that can be done later, but people could start the PDF labeling in documate.org/PDF.
I think that's.
And then come back in later and do cleanup and refinement once that we have the Acrobat licenses from Suffolk IT.
I think that is a wonderful approach. Okay. So then what we'd like to do is we'd like to get volunteers or whoever doesn't volunteer will get whatever's left at the end. So let's try to do groups of 2 or 3 on each of these 3 guys in yellow. So we got the Mary Mo's petition. Jack has already volunteered to help with that, and we want at least one other person there.
I'll volunteer for the Mary Mo's as well.
Okay, so Mia and Jack are gonna do Mary Mo's at least. If someone else wants to jump on, there's room for that as well. If not, hearing none and seeing none, we'll move on.
I can join on the Mary Mo's also.
Okay, it's fun. You're all in that part of the window for me, so it's like you're next to each other. Okay, so Vincent, Mia, and Jack will be on Mary Mo's. Complaint for contempt.
Yeah, I could do the complaint for contempt.
I can do that as well.
So I heard Jason and who was after that?
Right,
James. Okay. Okay, Jason and James.
Is that the one that? Is that the one that doesn't require Adobe?
That would
No,
not
that
require
requires
Adobe.
Adobe. It's the one
Well,
above
because it's
that.
already been labeled. It's been labeled, so
Oh.
it wouldn't require Adobe.
So you could just do the YAML for it.
Yeah. So that one you could just run through the wizard.
And that one, feel free to ask me, like, if you have substantive questions about that. These are something I know quite well.
Okay, so we had Jason and James. Did anyone else want to jump on that one, or? Okay. And how do I say your name entirely properly? Alini or?
Alani. I just don't have access to Adobe, and I've never used it before.
That shouldn't be a stopper on there. So if you have a preference over, if you want to do complaint for contempt over motion remove defaults, and then everyone else is going to end up on motion to remove defaults.
Is that just
There's
housing
Michael.
motion to remove defaults? It's not consumer.
I think
that is
I was
a very
thinking
interesting
people
question.
would use just the housing form. That's the one that I have, but.
Has Matt done the, I wonder if there's one for consumer.
That is a very interesting question. And given the looseness of the language, I would love to do both for them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we can make it a twofer though, but I think it would be great to be
different.
Yeah, they'd be different, but at least because the court has requested that form, then you could do two, right? One for housing and one for consumer. Yeah.
District was very tight-lipped in their description. Their description literally was motion to remove defaults or default judgments. That was the entirety of their
well, there you go.
of the form. As you can see, whereas a probate and family court was much more specific,
right.
And Superior even gave links.
Wow.
So.
I don't know housing, but is this the same as like a motion? Because Matt Brooks had sent me the docx for motion to vacate default judgment for lack of notice. Is that the same?
It's
so
one.
Really it would be this one. Motion to vacate default judgment is the one we're really talking about, because we're talking in the housing context. But I think it would probably go to both of these. So it's motion to vacate default judgment.
Here,
right, and that's a docx file.
Yeah, so it'll be different skills, but nobody who's on this call has automated a document at all. So actually, it's good to have a little diversity there, I think.
Yeah.
The one thing we don't have, which is an offline discussion, but just want to flag, is we don't have a list of variable names to use in a docx because they would not be the same as the ones we have for PDFs.
Okay, that's fair. Okay. So I think here this is an interesting.
I don't think that's a blocker. I mean, I don't mind taking some time to help generate that. Okay. Maybe someone else would like to do that too. I'm not sure. It's basically looking at Michelle would be another good person to do that, but I know you also have a lot of things to do. So.
Good times. Which one was this?
Well, we need a list of variable names that you would use in a docx that are compatible with what we turn them into in the interview generator. We just need that side of it. We don't need the side that is the PDF version of it.
Okay. I mean, they're not the same. They don't reflect. They're not going to be.
They're not going to be transformed. They're going to just use the same name that we transform them into.
I might be able to do that fairly quickly. I want to get through your PR first, though.
Yeah, I think that's the right priority order.
Okay, so then so that means that Michael and who are we missing? Tyler, I think we're missing today. So
yeah, he just completed the forms. I'm not sure.
Okay, so Michael and Tyler then would be on the motion to vacate. And I saw a thumbs up, so that's good. So then is functionally what this would mean for people. So the complaint for contempt folks are probably in the easiest slot because they can just take the PDF that has already been labeled, run it through the wizard. You'll get a YAML file. And then you're just going to try to work with that and see if you can get it to produce something. That's the first step, right? The Mary Mose folks are going to have to, their first step is going to be labeling. And the nice thing is there is some documentation on labeling, although most of it was thinking about it from the standpoint of using Adobe. But you can do that in another tool that we have linked as well. You will have to read up some documentation about how we name things so that you give them the right names so that when it goes through the wizard, it will deal with them the way we expect it to. The nice thing is that stuff I think we can point people at.
And it might help to understand if you've never programmed before. When you are programming, you are making a contract between yourself and the program. You say, I'm going to represent something this way, and the program says, when you do that, I will behave this way. So if you do not label something in the way you agreed to, you're not going to get the result you want. Just so that, sorry, that's something I never,
that's a good, I like that.
I never got to have about the PDFs. So
I like you putting it in lawyer terms.
Ha!
Yeah. If you want to go even more lawyer terms, it's the contract that you make is going to be, it's really about, you might even want to think about it as the contract you're making for proper citation, because it's going to be very much like you're blue booking something. And if you're off by a period, it's going to yell at you, right? So it's like the worst law review editor ever.
Yeah.
It will be entirely uncompromising. And then the one that I'm less sure about what people's first choice are is the motion to vacate default judgment, or their first action is. Quentin, what do you think?
What the first step should be for that?
Yeah, for those folks.
I think that the easiest thing to grasp right away, and maybe the most useful thing to do, is to start working in the YAML. And you don't have to actually create a document at the end until you're ready for that step.
Okay, so the motion to vacate default judgment people will basically just take what you've learned and you will just make a thing in your own sandbox and try to make an interview that asks the questions you would need to ask to get the answers you would need to put in that motion.
And do we have a person assigned to answering questions when they come up? Like when people get stuck, when, they need a pointer?
I think maybe we should decide on a channel where some of this conversation can take place.
Because the thing is,
the code channel?
Yeah.
I think the code channel is fine. We don't need another channel. Yeah, that's not too busy right now.
I think the code channel is good because I think that, as I said, and as I keep saying, is that the questions that you have might be questions that other people or other teams are going to have. So if you do have a question, it helps to just search, not now because there's going to be no answers, but, in a couple of days. So, yeah, if you have questions, rather go there, and then we'll keep an eye out. People who would ordinarily be answering stuff, we'll keep an eye out. And if we don't know the answer, if we see something, we'll tag somebody who might be able to answer. So that's how I think the best way to go forward is.
And so I think there's some so it means that the actions we need to give to people so they can do what they need to do is we need to give a copy of the motion to vacate to the folks who are doing that. And we also just think about how does this work into our Trello workflow? How do we document any of these things?
There still is a process of adding fields to the docx, but I don't see that as something that has to be done in advance. But it could be separately done by two different people, I guess. One person could be learning that part, one person could be learning the interview building.
Well, does the other person miss out though? Like, one of them miss out? Does each of them miss out on the other part of the process?
Yeah.
Potentially, but on the other hand, when you're teaching something to somebody, that reinforces your learning and helps you confirm that you have the right information. Although actually David and I both have to jump off right now for.
Oh, do we? Oh, it's time for our thing.
Yep.
So, Maeve, since you have the sort of I imagine you just have like all this information in your head about where to, because there is documentation on how to run the wizard, on how to label the fields. Can you shoot put that, maybe the best thing to do is to put that in the, maybe we just put it, I don't know, maybe what channel we put that in the channel for everyone as opposed to DMs. And then folks can follow up. And then the instructions for folks is that if you have no idea what you're doing for more than 30 minutes, you're supposed to ask someone a question somewhere on Slack.
To move forward. And I keep saying this was very good for me because like.
And also, since you are in these teams, you should start to rely upon each other. So I entirely expect you all to get off this call and to be like, to connect with your team member and go, what the heck did we just agree to?
So Mike is going to be like, so Tyler,
there
was this hour-long call. Let me fill you in.
I'm actually pretty good friends with Tyler, so I've been yeah, I've been keeping him updated.
Okay, cool. Great. So I think I'll drop that documentation in the main channel, and then we'll go from there. If you have any questions, just put it in the.
And you are going to have questions. You're going to have so many questions, but don't let the questions paralyze you from asking the questions. Just ask the questions.
Awesome.
If you want, make a list of them.
Yeah.
If that's more comfortable.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Quentin and I do have to hop off for another work.
That was a bumper meeting, guys. Cool.
Yeah, and you guys, it's going to be wonderful. It's going to be great. I can see it.
It's a new phase where you're all beta testers in our process, where we're really trying to actively encourage learning here. So you might find something that's difficult, and it's because we're not doing it right. And we need to know so we can improve it.
Yeah. Yes. So you can entirely be like, this is crazy. Tell us it's crazy and why it's crazy, and then we'll try to fix that. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Bye. We'll see you all tomorrow. I'm sure you'll have lots of blockers we'll try to get through.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
Bye.
Cheers.
And maybe we'll hear from you today.
Yes, hopefully.